Hi, it's David Dubow, and I'm excited to share a Dvar Torah with you that I wrote in the Gush something like 30 years ago in the Def Kesher. Um, Classically, when we ask the question, what was the sin of the spies? So we have to grapple with the fact that Moshe clearly asked them questions. They sent them with a clear agenda of what they're supposed to look at. What's the land look like? What are the people? What are the cities like? So obviously they had to give an honest answer. So wherein lies the sin? And most people speak about the fact that there's a difference between an objective report, reporting on the facts, and a subjective report, giving some sort of editorial about what can be done, what can't be done. And the fact that they gave their own opinion or a negative opinion was where the sin came in. Rav Yitzchak Arama gives a beautiful mashal, and to explain this same idea, he says, imagine somebody sent his servant out to the warehouse to buy a beautiful talit, and asked him, tell me what it's like. I want to know the quality of the wool. And in fact, the servant came back and said, the wool is of an excellent quality. It's a lovely color. It's great workmanship. And it cost $100. So that would be fine. But if he said it's a good talit, the wool is pure, it's a lovely workmanship, but it cost $100, he's already giving a little bit of a nuance there. That's the efes, the but that the spies say that seem to be part of the problem. I'd like to question that simple sort of answer. I think there's never a simple breakdown between objective and subjective, between facts and opinions. It's very difficult to say any kind of fact that doesn't have some kind of underlying presupposition. And every subjective opinion you're going to give has really facts attached to it. So dividing between objective and subjective is rather difficult. Saying statements like, America has the most powerful army in the world. Is that an objective statement? Is that a subjective statement? There's lots of assumptions that go into that. Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. We know how the world is filled with alternate narratives. And as much as we'd like to believe that facts are clearly facts, the truth is who attacked who is about how you tell the story. And there are people who are very much invested in telling a very negative and terrible story. And that's really the heart of the issue and what I want to get at today. In order to sort of understand this new approach, we have to talk about a concept called the intersubjective. The intersubjective is a combination of the objective and the subjective. So objective is a description of facts, and the subjective is definitions that we create. Now the truth is, almost everything you talk about in the world is conditioned on a certain accepted language, a certain accepted definition of things. So if I want to talk about something being 3 meters tall, we have to share an intersubjective understanding of what a meter is. If I want to talk about a beautiful painting, so we exist inside a community that agrees on certain aesthetic judgments. If I talk about a color blue, even there, something that sounds to be so objective includes within it a presupposition or a communal agreement of how we name colors. And so the intersubjective is a kind of a combination of those two that understand that almost any fact that you're going to say is an assessment which comes inside of a community which shares certain definitions together. And if we talk about the sin of the spies as being a problem of intersubjectivity, then I think we might open up new insights. Far from being a modern concept, the intersubjective, I'd like to say that the Torah was all over this idea already from the beginning. And the way I like to prove it is I'd like to do a careful reading of 2 psukim, which are the narrative account of what happened when the spies went to Eretz Yisrael. This is not the report that the spies give back. This is not the questions that Moshe sends them with. But in 2 psukim, the Torah pretty much describes what the spies encountered. Actually, 4 psukim altogether, but we're just going to talk about 2 of them. They went up by the south and came to Hebron. And Achai, Sheshai, and Talmai, the children of the Anak, were there. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Tzoan in Egypt. They came to the valley of Eshcol and cut down there a branch with one cluster of grapes. And they bore it on a staff between two. They also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. So the question is, what are these psukim telling us? And it's clear. They're telling us that in the land of Eretz Yisrael there exist giants. And Eretz Yisrael, or the city of Hebron in particular, is a very ancient city. And the fruit that they found there is big fruit. Giants, old city, and big fruit. But if we look very carefully at the way the Torah chose to tell us these things, you'll see that the Torah was very careful to not define any of this, not present any of it as objective fact. Instead, let's take a look. How does the Torah tell us that there are giants inside of Eretz Yisrael? Well, it says there's ha'anak. I'm not defining ha'anak. The anak that everybody seems to know about. Well, if you agree with me that there's somebody there who's understood to be a giant, I will tell you then, Achiman, Sheshai, and Talmai were children of that anak. They were derivatives of that one agreed anak. Same thing with the old city. Watch the same pattern. The Torah does not say Hebron is ancient. It goes about it in a roundabout way, which deals with the intersubjective. So'an Mitzrayim. Does everybody agree that So'an Mitzrayim is an ancient city? Only if you agree with me can we say something about Hebron. But we have to begin with an intersubjective agreement that there's a city called So'an in Egypt, which is agreed to be ancient. If we can agree about that, well, I will tell you that Hebron was 7 years older than that. I'm not telling you Hebron's old. I'm just telling you from the agreed upon point of origin, So'an Mitzrayim, that we can talk about a city that's even 7 years older than that. And fruit, same basic way. It doesn't say anything about the size of the fruit. All it tells us is this is fruit that needed to be carried by more than one person. I'm not telling you that that's big fruit. You can make your own conclusions. But most people agree that if it takes more than one person, Rashi says it was up to 8 people, but the Torah just says that it was 2 staffs. Each staff took 2 people, 2 staffs, whatever. A lot of people to carry one cluster of grapes. If you agree that that one cluster of grapes is big because it needed to be bore by more than one person, well, that's big fruit. Okay, so what is the sin? The sin is when the people say, Chazak hu mimenu. And Rashi says on that, Lo chazak hu mimenu, the pshat being they are stronger than us, it's that they are stronger than God. Klape mala, says Rashi. What is Rashi getting at? So I think the sin is not in lying, God forbid. The sin is not in giving their opinion, because they were called upon to give their opinion. The problem is that their opinion was based on assumptions that were wrong. They factored God out of the picture. They didn't assume what they were supposed to assume, that Kodesh Baruch Hu was going to help them, that Kodesh Baruch Hu was giving them strength, that all that they witnessed just coming out of Mitzrayim was something that they could rely upon going into Eretz Yisrael, and leaving the presuppositions that they were supposed to take with them to assess the fitness of Eretz Yisrael. That is the sin. By canceling the sort of ideas that they're supposed to carry with you where they go about in making judgments. Okay, so we can take this idea of what the sin was in the intersubjective and do a couple interesting things with it. We're going to take a look at the definition of a minyan. The Gemara in Brachos 21bet says something very interesting, that a minyan we know is 10 people. How do we know it? Well, we learn it from a Gezerah Shava that connects the minyan to Eidat Korach, Toch, and then connects Eidat Korach through the word Eidah, to the minyan of the 10 spies, that we have over here, and that's what a minyan is. Very surprising to find out that our definition of a minyan, which is certainly a positive thing where we'll be able to Nikdash Hashem, consecrate Kodesh Baruch Hu in our midst, is done through the definition of the 10 spies in their evil report. Why a negative definition or drawing from this negative idea? So the Gemara is basing its learning, it's limud, on the idea or the word of Eidah. Eidah comes from Edut. It means to testify. And what it means is that all of Bnei Israel was testifying to certain shared truths. They shared certain presuppositions, certain definitions of things, which is what makes us into an Eidah, into a community. We share assumptions. How does that work out? So this definition of the 10 meaning follows from the 10 spies because they disagreed. They seceded from the community. They changed their mind, and by changing their mind is why they left. And being only from 10 spies, people who sin or disagree with the basic assumptions becomes the definition of a minimum Eidah, of a minyan. The appearance of tzitzit at the end of this parsha is kind of a mystery, but maybe we can explain it with our idea that we're developing here. Tzitzit share the word lo taturu, and latur is a theme word which appears all over this week's parsha. Now it's a unique word. It appears all of 14 times in all of the Chumash, once in last week's parsha, B'halotcha, 12, and the rest of the 13 times are in this week's parsha, 12 of them only connected with the spies, and once with Kriyat Shema. Here's the pasuk: V'haya lechem letzitzit uritem oto uschartem et kol mitzvot Hashem v'asitem otam v'lo tatur acharei levavchem v'acharei enechem. So what's the idea? The idea is that tzitzit are a cognitive space. They are a definition of one amma, and they represent this idea that wherever I go, wherever I travel around, I have to carry with me certain assumptions about what the truth is. And those tzitzit are like sentinels. They're like guards that are on the edges of where I am, and they come slap me in the face if I leave the cognitive space which is agreed upon or allowed by the Torah. Lo taturu means don't leave, don't tour around, don't leave the assumptions of what the Torah wants you to believe. Rashi a few times gives an interesting interpretation that also shows that it's really all about how you interpret things. For example, when Moshe asked the people, so do they live in machanaim, in strong fortified cities, or do they live in prazot, open cities? And you would think that strongholds is the problem, but Rashi says the opposite. Rashi says if they're am chazak, if they're a strong people, so then they're going to be open in camps, in machanaim. And that turns the whole thing around. Because again, it's only a question of interpretation. What are you afraid of? Well, it depends on what your definition of what makes strong, intimidating people. Is the problem strongholds, or is the problem brave and determined fighters? Here's another example. The spies say it's Eretz Ochelet Yoshveha, a land that eats its inhabitants. Is that a positive or negative? It sounds very much like it's a negative. But Rashi says the opposite. Rashi says that there were all these funerals that Hashem made going on inside of Eretz Israel in order to distract the people, in order that the spies could have free reign and walk around the place. So exactly what we thought was something of a negative description, Rashi turns it around and showing us that depending on your assumptions and your interpretive power, you have to look at the situation through a lens which attests to the belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his hashgacha. Men of stature, this is our final point. They are anshe midot. And Kalev and Yoshua say to the people, Tsar tzilam me'alehem. Don't fear them. Remove your fear, this subjective experience when you look at them. So it's a very interesting phrase, fear connected to tzel, to a shadow. And I think this is also one more example of exactly what we want to speak about. Shadows are a function of point of view, meaning you can move a shadow not by changing your position necessarily, but by changing the point of perspective of the sun. If the sun changes and you believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is on your side, so then you will cast a shadow on your enemy. If you think God is on the opposite side helping your enemy, so they will cast their shadow on you. Be'ezrat Hashem, may we always keep the assumptions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's help and hashgacha and trust and believe that he is running the world and doing so for the benefit of Am Yisrael. These are difficult times. It is not always easy to believe that or to see that. It's easy to believe it, but it's not always easy to see it evidently. But I hope, Bezrat Hashem, this analysis of the intersubjective and the Chet HaMeraglim will teach us how important it is to hold fast to the proper assumptions in the way that we interpret the world. Shabbat Shalom.